Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Casey.
Hi, I'm Cyndi.
And I'm Josh. It's great to have both of you back in my library in person. Casey's been on a few of the Zoom discussions for season 14. This is Cyndi's first appearance. This is her third season on the show, and it's always a delight to have you on board.
Thank you, Josh.
This is a panel completely filled with published writers. People have published at least something in their lives. We're going to be going over a John Keats poem called Ode to a Nightingale. We originally had this on the season 5 agenda. Because we never got around to doing it, I thought that it would be good to cover something that he's written and to cover it now. The discussion starter that I have for this is the overview that John Keats was a poet of the English Romanticism movement. I know Professor Hartman and I were talking. He died prematurely from TB. I think I've outlived him in my lifetime because her argument is that he was so depressed because he had so much time to think. This poem here, it was written in one of two places that he was sitting under a tree and he was reminiscing about his thoughts that resulted in the creation of this poem. My discussion starter is, why go with a nightingale?
When I read it, I just assumed it was somewhat based on a true story, and that he actually was depressed, heard a nightingale, and decided to write a poem about it.
To me, it seems like he's going over all of these thoughts. That's often what he does, and he uses flowery language. He's one of the more challenging writers. If you want a romantic poet that is intriguing and somewhat easy to understand, I'd go with either Wordsworth, Blake, or Coleridge. Particular Rime of the Ancient Mariner. To me, Keats reads very older language, somewhat Shakespearean.
Yeah, I didn't understand any of what I was reading.
It's tough.
So I was like, let me see if I can find a contemporary English translation, and I couldn't. So then I said, well, let me see if I can find a commentary, and that's what I found. And that's why I know what it's about, because I saw a video on the commentary. Other than that, I had no clue what he was talking about.
He thinks so much about death. He sees this immortal bird. No hungry generations tread thee down. He sees this nightingale, this beautiful bird, not just a beautiful bird that sings a beautiful tune, with this great sense of freedom and self-satisfaction, whereas he is constantly in a state of thought, in a state of gloom and depression.
The nightingale is, I think, a night bird. It's usually visible in the evening. It's often other writers have associated with the nightingale with death and dying or facing mortality, which I think he does in this poem, and he does it well. And I think I'm slightly at an advantage because I am a lover of Shakespearean writing, so to me this was like, oh, this is nice. And I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the rhythm, the rhythm scheme he chose, which was which, unless I'm mistaken, he invented that particular pattern.
Who, Shakespeare?
No.
Keats.
Keats. The one he uses in Ode to a Nightingale. I think he actually invented that, because I haven't seen it.
That's somewhat admirable when they're able to invent execution as far as poetry is concerned, because your general poetry that people constantly refer back to is rhyme. The 4 stanzas, and it's AABB or ABAB. It's one or the other. But I still like the effort that's put into it, because as much as free verse is probably the easiest to get into and the easiest to execute, I wouldn't say understand, because sometimes people just use it to rant and display their angst and call it free verse poetry. You could say that Ode to a Nightingale is just that, and that John Keats' poetry is just like that. I think that he puts the effort in to provide as much substance as possible. I could see people using these kind of references with aspects from current events. This was a little bit more of what was in style, talking about the various figures, be it mythology or the stars and the constellations or whatnot. Was there anything in particular that stuck out, any particular lines?
I like the imagery when he refers to, he was referring to its wings and the light-winged dryad. I don't think I'm pronouncing it right. And then he referred to him having the purple...
That light-winged dryad of the trees in some melodious plot.
Yeah, that is so lovely and picturesque.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was reading it, I realized too that if you read Keats, if you read that particular poem and you read it in our American English, it doesn't have the same beat. I said, oh, you've got to read it in British, so it's winged. It's not
Yes.
winged.
Oh.
Otherwise the rhythm is wrong.
Come to look at it, it does seem to that thou light winged dryad of the trees in some melodious plot of beech and green and shadows numberless singest of summer in full-throated ecbese. I wish I had more of that aviary imagery pertaining to the Nightingale itself. I think that someone taking on Keats's execution is going to be very self-immersed within their experience and using that nightingale as something that they long for.
According to the commentary that I saw, he was giving imagery of what he wanted to be. He was wishing to be the nightingale because he felt it was better than living as a human or whatever he was going through in that moment in time. I could only relate to it because in my younger years, I remember wondering what it would be like to be a bird. As far as flying and not worrying about work, I mean, other than, of course, as a bird, a small bird, you have to worry about being eaten by a big bird. But other than that, he seems to use this daydream of being a bird to get out of his mind of real life.
I think there are good arguments to wanting to be a bird, except for the predators.
Yeah, the idea of dealing with your own mortality and wanting to escape it, and if you could be a bird, you could get away.
Anything else anybody wanted to contribute? Any additional thoughts?
No, only once I knew what the poem was about, I thought it was very creative. Especially if this indeed is based on somewhat real life. I thought it was creative of him to write a poem like this, talking about, I hear this bird. What would it be like if I was a bird instead of a human? And I thought it was creative, and I like the idea and the concept of the poem.
I like his mechanics, but I think that I need to get a little bit more into Keats before I can really make a overall judgment. As far as what I've come across thus far, he's not my favorite, in particular within within that period.
You're not gonna like him
I
a little bit.
couldn't really make that judgment because this is the only poem I read of his. So I really can't say if I like him overall because this is the only poem I read.
His other poems, they're written just like this, in the way that his word choices and his language. But if you are interested in reading this, more of Keats's poetry and more poetry from other major British poets, here is my copy, the Mentor Book of Major British Poets, edited by Oscar Williams. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading. Hi there, this is Josh, and on the next episode of Literary Gladiators, Casey, Charlie, Cyndi, and I will be discussing A Hunger Artist by Franz Kafka. If you like what you see on this channel, please support us on our Patreon, where the money that we make will allow us to provide you, the viewer, with even more content. Thank you, and for now, keep reading.